Grading and packing. Understanding what specifications for the buyer is looking for is really important, because that's really going to dictate how you're going to grade the fruit. Traceability. If you've got Eurogap, that will be part of that anyway. And certainly you need to be able to trace that back to the farm. But this is also very good information that as suppliers into the system, that you can start using this information to start tracing back any problems with disease in blocks. And so over time you get a record of what's happening on your particular blocks on your farm. And if that block is high disease, that one doesn't. This information actually can feed right back into that. Post-harvest fungicide. That's something I'd like to talk a little bit more in depth on. Before now, currently the options are quite limited in what have you been using now for post-harvest? Which is Chlorase is effectively your pathogens that you have here in the sin. And also in the Punjab are what they call stem and rot pathogens, and they tend not to respond very well with Chlorase. Chlorase is very good for anthracnose and Alternaria. Alternaria, I almost guarantee you that will be a problem here, but there are other ways to control that. What we need to look at is an option. To do this successfully, you really do need to look at an option, a post-harvest fungicide option. And we have, there are several ones in the armoury. There's a new one in Australia which our industry is going down to with Scholar, which is flutonoxanol. The problem we've got with that, and particularly going to Europe, there's no MRLs for that currently into Europe. So while it is a good and effective fungicide on stem and rots, we can't get you to go down there into European markets because, as I said before, they'll pick it up. No MRL, that's it. The one that I think shows the best potential promise is Amastar. And now that at the moment is difficult, it's not possible.
At this moment, Amastar is not there.
Sorry?
You can use the TO or any alternative, but we don't have Amastar here.
Amastar is not available here.
I know it's not available.
But that market research making me found out that Amastar is not working. And hence it's
Which one's the other one he's using? What's that?
It's again a bioproduct, basically a further consulting ingredient.
Yeah.
It is recently introduced.
Yeah. Hot water or? Do your packing sheets have hot water
Yeah.
capabilities?
See, the important thing is to, now, there was a research work done for getting a couple of bottles out of Australia, easier thing to do. And we are sending it, we need a certain supply of these products.
Yeah.
And so we exactly don't know what to do with post-harvest things. Stem and red is an issue.
Oh, it will be your number one issue. And that's why we need to think of a strategy.
Absolutely.
To look at it. We found with the Amastar work extremely well on a suite of packages that we had. What we need to look at, each area can have different organisms. It works well on some, but not on others, and that's what we need to look at. With our experiences, it really does work well as post-harvest, but also as a field. I don't know if you've got capacity to do field spraying here. Have they or not?
Yeah, we do.
You do.
Have the capacity.
Because that's the other option, is actually doing it as...
All of the farms have these clean sprays which you can do the sprays.
Yeah, what chemicals?
They were chemical. Yes.
Yeah. Because I would still...
Pre and post harvest.
If you are talking about pre-harvest, we are using different herbicides.
Yeah. Yes.
And we are changing. before bud formation or before flower, we use mostly copper base,
Yeah.
approx chloride. After that, then yeah, and after flower and the size mango, we are using that topaz, vertigo. I don't know what are the chemicals. They are the color chemicals. So
Yeah.
this is what we have.
And see, none of them are going to be really effective this year. None of those chemicals are
I don't think if we are doing anything for stem, and that's my understanding. What we're doing probably is the best for the powdery mildew and all this.
Yeah, powdery mildew.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is that stem and rot, Amistar is in.
Yeah. And anthracnose
it's the one.
also.
Yeah. Oh, it works on
Yeah,
anthracnose as well.
both of them.
We do have another one which is called Aero. That's a new one that's out. It's a field spray. But if you guys have got the capacity, what our farmers were doing in our seed freight group, in Australia, Amistar is registered as a pre-harvest, not as a post-harvest. We were actually spraying the trees about 3 days. So 3-day withholding period.
Prior to harvest.
We're spraying them 3 days prior to harvest, and that was giving us excellent results. We also had some growers actually doing it as post-harvest, and they gave us fantastic results. So I don't know whether it's worth. I would certainly be approaching Syngenta again.
I approached Syngenta and they assured me it has 14,000 hot copies.
14,000 per litre.
It's around
It's cheaper than we can get.
cheaper than Australia.
That's cheaper than we can get.
Australia, but costly at Pakistani price.
Yeah. But you don't actually use a lot. You don't use a lot. And the question is, what's the cost of the potato fruit?
I'll share you what we have both from the sides.
Yeah.
But
So you can actually get it, you can actually buy it, it's a general supply. The reality it's a spray, I mean 15 containers you're looking at, what's that, 300 tonnes of fruit. 300 tonnes of fruit, you won't need a lot of chemicals. It's a pretty insurance policy about
$1 million.
Yeah.
But recently doctors are finding, I think, quite satisfactory as far as post harvest fungicides. We have this post harvest. It's working against basically ACL.
Sorry, what is it?
Against ACL.
What is it?
Stem and rot.
Yeah.
It's working against
Yeah,
stem and
yeah,
rot.
yeah. And it is, I mean, and it's the best product on the market that's available for
Right
semi.
now,
How do you talking about
Nativa.
On Natura, yeah.
Nativa.
Yeah. That I don't know, I'm not familiar with that one, and that's something we need to
I'll share
look
with you
at.
a form
Yeah.
which are actually
Yeah.
research program by
And that's the post harvest.
One of the things, the gap has been created after
बनाना थे कहीं
after the research work basically stopped, the project stopped. So there was no news as to what's happening in the research.
Yeah.
So it's only last after, I think 1 month before that there was a bit of work research work shown as to what had happened.
Yeah.
But last 2 or 3 years really we were blank as to what the research work was.
Well, if you've got that one that's a post harvest, and you've got Amistar as a pre harvest, you have a very good tools in your armour, extremely good. And then on top of that, you can start identifying your low disease blocks. That is actually going to be really good. So how are you saying it's 14,000 rupees a litre? Yeah, we're paying about $1,000 for 5 litres.
See, Peter, one of the gaps, I don't know, now that I'm not talking a few farms, but most of the farms, and I'm not sure on the 7 farms as well, that when our food becomes big of a bigger size, we stop spraying it. We think it as absolutely everything is all right and is ready for harvest. Now, that's a basic understanding. We understand that it's not correct, but that's how it is. Now, that's the gap that we have. And this gap needs to be filled, at least these 7 farms. Now, for them, there needs to be at least 2 or 3 things that we have to follow, which identify availability, and that they don't have MRL stuff and other things which are on SPS blocking things, so that we could do it on our farms.
Well, I definitely, to go forward, I'd be exploring that very rigorously.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's
You would find a lot of array of products made, they may not be registered,
yeah.
and there are pesticides, flowering side, controlling pests and diseases, but not when we are saying pre-harvest. I take it as 4 to 5 days before harvesting and then after harvesting immediately, not what we get in 1 month pack.
See, Amastar sprayed it 3 days, as we did, 3 days before harvest. Actually gives you quite good post-harvest shelf life. Post-harvest effects as well. And if you've got the other one, but is the other one, is there an MRL for Europe in that? There is. Well, that's something you need to make sure, because there's definitely an MRL for Amastar in Europe. And that combined with, and start putting some good hygiene practice in the autumn for reducing inoculum, then you're well on your way to starting a system. You know, so identifying the blocks, and that's something we need to look at. We'll talk about detail later, because that's an ongoing process. Orchard hygiene, and then your post-harvest, or your pre-harvest spraying and your post-harvest spraying. What I'm hearing now, what you're spraying on now, your trees, really is going to have minimal impact on stem-in-rot. Stem-in-rot, for example, copper is protected. Stem-in-rots are actually inside the tree, so it's not going to have an effect. They will, like the proposal, yeah, that will have an effect on alternaria. Because alternaria is a problem you would find in seed rate, but Amastar and others also. Alternaria is actually quite easy to control.
Pero sabe melody ko. Ele puto, huh?
Cleaning, reducing inoculum. You know, cleaning the blocks up. And I've seen blocks. We're doing that measure. We did that. That was done year in, year out. And I've seen blocks go from almost up to 100% down to virtually 2 to 3% disease levels. And that's just, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's just basically hygiene and good practices. Well, when you get a lot of rain, yes, let's see, we're very similar to your conditions. We don't get rain. From flowering to harvest, we very rarely get rain. So, anthracnoses, I don't know what it is. You know, they do when it does rain, which is happens on rare occasions, but it's something we don't have to deal with. And this is it. If you don't get rain on between flowering and harvest, anthracnose is not going to be an issue. But
sometimes there's a lot of moisture. There's a lot of moisture to an extent that everything becomes moist during the period.
Yes,
because the winds are changing from winter to summer, and then you get a lot of dew.
Yeah, but how long are those dews lasting? Are they lasting?
Sometimes it lasts more, sometimes it lasts less. But I think 15 to 20 days is the transition of the weather period.
Yes,
when,
but in like we get heavy dews too.
Yeah.
But they'll last, maybe 1 or 2 hours in the morning, early in the morning, and then it's dried out. And the grass will be wet.
Yeah, grass becomes wet. Yeah.
As soon as the sun comes up.
Same thing here. Same thing.
It just dries out very quickly.
It's like this.
And so that's actually not a major risk. See if it's staying moist for a good part of the day for heavy dews and that. And the fact that you've got powdery mildew suggests to me you're not getting much rain anyway, because that's a real dry, cold, cool sort of disease. So, right, we just go over. Okay, this is another area which we really need to have a go for time.
How long is the presentation? Whenever friends would want to ask questions and discuss in a way.
I'm skimming over some of it because I just want to try and highlight the really important issues.
What I'm suggesting is once you're through, there are a couple of people who've already done some seed traits, probably they're also talking on their experience.
Cool chain. and how that actually starts and planning that's what we really need. It's starting at the time of picking, and how we're going to manage that fruit between getting it from the orchard to the supermarket shop. And what are your options? Getting that field heat, as the member said, whatever you're doing at this end, it's going to cost you that end if you don't get it right. How are we going to get that field heat out? Have you thought about that? Any ideas?
We have a food, go to the blast chillers,
Yeah.
and cool it for 8 to 9 hours to reduce the temperature of the powder.
Yeah. To what sort of temperature are you looking at?
12 degrees?
Up to 12 degrees.
12 degrees.
Yeah. Okay.
From
In
30 from 30
5 hours.
5 hours.
Yeah. And then loading it.
In 5 hours, it goes from 36 or 35 to 12 degrees in 5 hours in blast chiller.
Yeah.
Then you maintain in the cold storage for
Okay. Well, that's good. So you got them available, right?
Previously, it was never done through this forced cooling. The first time that will be done, to my understanding, through forced cooling.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. I did touch before on the maturity. That what stage internal maturity you're picking the fruit. That's going to have a big impact on how flexible your cooling system can be. And it's important to go. But not only that, there are other implications which I haven't touched on yet with maturity, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But getting it right for getting that late stage seed freight is really important. It gives you flexibility in the cooling, but also gives you flexibility at the other end, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, this last point is absolutely critical. We're talking about blast chillers going down from 35 to 12. You potentially could see a lot of damage to your fruit. What you need to look at and consider is bringing it down to a temperature like 15 and cutting it off there, and then getting from 15 to 12 take much longer because it's a real shock to the fruit, and you can end up with a lot of chill damage on the fruit. Look over some next. Okay. I just wanted to highlight that this is when a system goes really wrong. Don't worry about what's written there. Look at these lines.
Excuse me, there was a point that when you go down temperature, do not increase that.
Yes. Yeah.
There was a point
Yeah. But this is
in last.
Yeah.
So, but after passing through this wash, we dip it in hot water for 3 to 5 minutes up to 52 degrees.
when are you cooling it though?
After that.
After that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's, yeah.
Not after cooling, but after washing.
Yes, yeah. I understand in the packing line it's going to go up to that. That's unavoidable.
There's a concern. The concern is that food is very hot and you're dipping it for say 10 minutes or 15 minutes to 50 degrees Celsius or whatever, then it might just rot the food. It might go to an irreversible stage.
Yeah.
Is it correct thinking or not? I think that's the concern.
Irreversible, not sure.
That if the temperature becomes so high of the pulp and the fruit that the fruit will become rotten if you are taking it too hot to.
No, I mean you're going to get scalding on the skin before you get any problems with that. And the thing is, what you will find is by heating it up, you are actually potentially costing a little bit that end, but you're playing one risk off against the other, and you're heating it because for disease, and so you're playing a disease risk off or trading it off at a little bit of shelf life there. And in my book, that's a good trade-off. It is, yes, you definitely will be reducing a shelf life, but not by a lot, but potentially taking disease out of the system. That's the important thing. So yeah, there is a trade-off. In everything you do, there is a trade-off. I just want to show you this. This is what happens when things go wrong, and you get this roller coaster effect, and that's just totally disastrous on the fruit. You get heating, cooling, and if there's any disease in that fruit, it will just come out. It makes it express very quickly. Just flick over, Sahal, to the next slide. Now, this is what you're trying to get in your cool chain.
3 to 5 minutes.
Mr. Peter, I would like to put the question in another way. You see, first we take the fruit out, we wash it, and then we dip it into a hot water dip for 3 to 5 minutes at 52 degrees centigrade.
Yeah.
It gets dried up, it comes out on the line, and then how long after that should we cool blast it? For how long? Or should there be a gap in between? Because you see the temperatures of there might be a scalding on the skin. So do you prefer or do you advise us not to put the fruit for more than 2 minutes or further 3 minutes?
Well, after it's come out, I would think having a delay between coming out of hot water and before it goes into the blast chiller would be a good thing, because you're allowing a bit of
immediately. It should go immediately to the blast chamber?
No, I think let a bit of that external
How much
temperature
time?
gather. That I'm not sure of that, because we haven't tested and measured that. But what I'm finding is if you're going from a high temperature, and I think the best way to work that out is have some probes, and it's at 52 degrees. How long does it take? Through experiment, how long does it take to get to ambient air temperature?
It should take
It would
about
probably,
1 hour?
probably take an hour.
About
maybe.
an hour?
Hour?
Yes, it should take an hour.
Yeah.
From 52 degrees to an ambient temperature, room temperature, it should take about an hour.
When you get a rapid drop like that, your risk of a shock, cold shock become greater. And I would think restoring that to ambient air temperature would be a good measure.
And then put it in the
Hospital
glass.
probably has some information on that one.
Same wood. As you have told that the mango should not, we have to protect from mango shock, mango shock. And we should give temperature in an increase or decrease in a uniform way.
Yes.
In a uniform way.
But
Here, what we are doing, we have taken mango from field, put it, wash it naturally. There will be a variation in this process. Washing, temperature cool down to a certain degree. Then we again put it on hot water temperature, and it's not minimum hot, but we give it to 52 degrees centigrade for 3 to 5, and in other cases 45 minutes and to an hour. Then again we take out and put him in blast chiller, where we give him forced chilling for 4 to 6 hours. So how can we avoid this? How can we give uniform lowering or increasing?
Well, first of all, there's several points you raised. You're talking about some systems you're looking at heating it for 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
3 minutes.
Now that's for disease control.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
When you're talking about those long times, that's for fruit fly control, which is not going to be an issue setting to Europe.
Yes.
So now, in 3 to 4 minutes, the core temperature is not going to be raised to 52 degrees.
At 52 degrees.
No.
At
3 to 4 minutes, you'll probably find.
At 52 degrees.
Yeah, at 52 degrees.
And if you dip it for 3 minutes, the core temperature would not rise.
No, the first probably centimetre, or you'll see a noticeable rise in the fruit. But if you actually get a probe and go straight to the centre of the fruit, in 3 minutes or 4 minutes, you're not going to get that temperature rising to 52 degrees. That takes quite a bit of time to get the heat to transfer to the centre of the fruit.
30 minutes normally in a food weighing around 300 grams. It takes 30
ಪಲ್ಪ್ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ನಪ್ಪದು
Yeah.
कोर में गरम न थी तो मत थारा उसके गरम थी कोर देखो है अंदर देखो है
Yes.
कुछ लिए था एक और
Yeah. So,
पल्प देखो पर
so you,
Then in three-dimensional plastic.
yeah.
After hard water,
and he देखो क्या तो कहने के simultaneously gradually cool कर
That's it.
I thought जो shock नहीं होता
Not the photon.
then वो frozen
What
thing
normally happens in an Australian system is it goes through the hot water treatment and then it goes through and it's packed afterwards. Hot water fungicide, dried, and then it's packed. So there's a delay, there's naturally a delay of probably an hour to 2 hours before that fruit gets into the forced air.
frozen.
That's the system. So, and in your system too, when you're looking at packing them, you're going to try and chill them before you pack them, or you're going to pack them and then chill them?
No, pack it and
Pack it
then
and
Pack them and chill them. So, by default, they're not going to go into that chiller before an hour. Anyway,
Excuse me. But if we treat mango for fruit fly treatment at 40 centigrade for 60 minutes, what will be effect on skin and on the pulp?
Well, the skin's been,
For 60 minutes,
yeah, 60 minutes for,
for fruit fly treatment.
yeah, what's the temperature? What's that, 48? 48. Yeah, so you're at a lower temperature, so, and the data that I've seen that's come out of that doesn't have a detrimental effect on the scalding of it. Correct me if I'm wrong anyway. Of the 48, it's not, yeah, the stuff that I've seen, the work that's been done, I think Mark did some work on that, and it wasn't scalding.
That's 12%.
No.
maybe other issues.
Yeah. What, and having done some work which we recently did in my region in Australia, I understand a bit better probably why you don't get scalding. We looked at hot water dips. Our ambient temperature is similar to Pakistan in our harvesting. We're 42, 43, 44 degrees. We sat fruit in just in the shed, just left at ambient temperature for 8 hours. Put them in hot water dip, no scalding. We got fruit that was held at that was picked and kept at a lower temperature. Put it in a dip, no scalding. You get that sort of that conditioning in the fruit, and that's important. It's important going up, and it's important going down as well. It's that conditioning, allowing the fruit time to adjust to those different temperatures, and with the hot water it can actually mean just preconditioning. And in your situation, just keeping it in the shade for a few hours, you're going to get warmer temperatures, and that's part of the conditioning process. As we found out with the work we're doing in Kununurra in Australia. So, and for looking at fruit fly, getting that heat out, that was your crux of what you're trying to say is getting how long you're getting that fruit out. You've got the pulp temperature is going to be at 46 degrees. Yeah, so 48 degrees. That's going to take quite some time to get that out. And putting it through a blast chiller, which is what we're seeing here, has to be managed quite well. And what we find is you're basically coming up from here and going down to here. The critical point, damage points start to occur around here. So what you do is you basically stage your cooling. Now this is what we use for sea freight, but it'll be a similar sort of principle. We bring it down to 15, we use 15 degrees to cut off. Now that's mean with the Sindri and Chauncey, we probably need to play around and find out what that cut off potentially is. It might be a little bit higher than 15. I can't imagine it'll be lower. So maybe 16 degrees. And that's when we stop. So with the blast chillers or forced air chillers, we won't chill them anymore.
No. This is all right. This is the cooling temperature. We agree that.
Yeah.
But when we harvest the mango at field, it is around about 45 centigrade,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When we harvest, put the mangoes for a few times, for half hour,
Yeah.
to down the temperature. Then we wash it at a normal water. Again, we put at 52 centigrade for 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that there must be some effect of the temperature over the skin and on the pulp.
So,
Right. Then we move the mango to dry at 40 centigrade. Right. The variation of temperature, to lower the temperature is good. Right. To increase the temperature from mango, it must affect on the pulp and on the skin. Because from Punjab, they sent Tonsa, they treated at 52 centigrade for 3 to 5 minutes. And when they reached at destination, all the mangoes were worst. So I want to know the temperature effect on skin and pulp during the transition of 25 days, the oxidation and the wrinkles on the skin and other things, how we control, and is it necessary to treat the mangoes at 52 centigrade for a long time?
well, you don't do it for a long time.
For
Yeah.
must we fight some people?
Yeah.
We treat for internose at 52 centigrade for 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Some people treat for fruit fly at 48 centigrade for 60 minutes. For 60 minutes, it's unbelievable that we dip the mangoes for hour at 48 centigrade. There must be some
there
effect
is.
on the skin and the pulp.
Well, on the skin, no. If it's conditioned, we don't find it's actually detrimental on the skin. And treating fruit at those sort of temperatures is actually quite common practice globally. We do it in Australia for our variety sending to Japan. It doesn't, but it definitely does have an effect on your shelf life at the other end.
At what temperature do you treat for Japan?
Japan, I think, is 48 and a half for 4 hours or something.
Yes, VST.
Yeah.
This is 48 degrees centigrade for 4 hours.
For 4 hours, yeah. And so you get the whole core temperature.
48 degrees centigrade for 4 hours.
Yes, but VHT.
VST, that is another thing. Vapor, the vapor treatment. But physically, that mango is dipping in hot water at 52 centigrade.
You see, it's been cooked.
Yeah,
No, it's not
no.
good. It is not good. Cooked is at 100 centigrade.
48 has been cooking.
48, your own,
Maybe I
your
can
own
reply
hand
because,
can.
Yes, you are welcome. Sir.
yeah, in case of
Centigrade is
China,
not really
China
hot.
need 48 degrees
Your
for
air
60
temperature during the.
Sir, excuse me, sir. Sir.
Excuse me, if one person can type.
Sir, excuse me. Ji, please.
Maybe I can give a little answer to this question. Because China has a requirement for mango importation at 48 degree for 60 minutes. So it's not a case of Pakistani mango. They are importing this on same rule and regulation from Australia, from Thailand, from Philippines, from South Africa,
Right.
from South America. So their mango don't have any problem. They are also going through the same process. So I think it's a matter of post-harvest practice.
Right.
Yeah, that's the most important point.
But
At farm level.
how time? Excuse me. But how time? What time they took from Singapore, from other countries to reach in China, giving that treatment by air or by sea?
By sea, I think from Thailand, by sea it's around 10 days.
10 days.
Yeah. From Australia, I didn't see any.
It's we're doing it by sea in Australia, and it's
We have
about
done?
yeah, it's about 16 days.
16.
But that treatment is for the fruit fly treatment.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Australia,
Is it possible?
the water
Is it possible that we may treat our mangoes pre-harvest to prevent the fruit fly?
Pre-harvest. Well, there are chemical options.
They are chemical, but
Yeah.
there are
But
fruit
they're
fly
not-
traps.
But they're not acceptable internationally.
They are not acceptable.
Yeah, yeah.
But that treatment is acceptable.
Has to be a post-harvest disinfestation
fine.
to be accepted internationally.
Then let's help
There is
to
a
assess us
difference between
how to
Pakistani mango and
overcome these problems.
the mango,
Given that
the
temperature.
mango you are talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
The skin of Pakistani mango is thinner.
Maybe.
Then the mango you are exporting from Australia or from other parts of the world. And
Most of the varieties,
SKP and Calypso, all they are
they have skin of around 75-80 microns, whereas our varieties, they are 40-45 microns thick skin.
That's cross.
Thin skin, we have thin skin varieties.
Asana mana thin and
If I
thick.
can just interject, see,
Hal ta budan.
this is a bit of a longish discussion,
thin and
whether we're doing it in 5
Oh,
minutes
but
or we're doing it for 1 hour. As of now, I think if we do a successful model for 5 minutes or 3 minutes will be good enough to start off with.
Well, the reality, yeah.
And also relevant to Pakistani mango, that how it will be done. So I think if you could just concentrate on that bit first, and then we can start saying that what about for 1 hour, 45 minutes. And as I understand, I didn't know it before, my friends probably knew it was, that it requires after 5 minutes, the food should be conditioned so that from 40 to 52 or 50, coming back to 34, 35, should be a slower process, not just taking it to forceful cooling boom. So this is what we understand.
It takes 2 to 3 hours to enter in that.
Sir, excuse me, sir, my question also over here is, since you are aware that we have a thin-skinned mango, what would be the best arrangement for us to export these things under such conditions? Should we put it, should we dip it or cook it for 2 minutes under 52 degrees of centigrade, or a lesser at 48 as the Australians are doing?
Yeah, well, the 40, what the problem here, we've got 2 totally different systems, hot water dipping for 2 totally different reasons, and we're confusing the 2. You've got fruit fly control, and that's only done because that's what your importing country requires, like China, that's what they're saying you have to do. But not Europe. Europe does not. Europe, fruit fly is not an issue. For Europe, we are only heating the fruit for disease control. That's the only reason we're doing it, is to improve the shelf life for disease control. I mean, and it's for only a short period of time to allow the fungicide to actually penetrate deeper into the fruit.
So what should be the time?
And that's where time you're looking at 3 to 4 minutes.
At
50.
At 50. Should we do it lower?
No, well, the research is suggesting the lower you go, the less effective it is. If you go above 52, you're ending up with more scalding. Now, there are certain factors that predispose the fruit to scald damage, and one can be is if for some reason you had a rain. You had a rain, and then you pick the fruit and you put it in hot water, you can guarantee you'll have scald damage. It changes the turgor pressure in the skin.
Because of temperature differences.
But basically, and the work we've seen is the hot water at that temperature is not having a detrimental impact on the fruit. And in fact, by doing that, you are buying yourself, you're guaranteeing that. You're trading off, if you've got everything right, got a disease-free piece of fruit, you could probably take it out to here using the system, but you've got to guarantee it's disease-free. What you're doing by adding that system, that hot water in the beginning, is you're managing your risk of this disease. Remember at the beginning I said that's your number one risk you've got to manage. So if you can't manage the disease, forget about this section because they won't talk to you. But just a quick moving on, we can talk about this bit later. What are you proposing to do? Once you've pulled the fruit, what are you proposing to do? Then load it straight to the containers? Bring the container to the farm?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Right. That's exactly what I want to hear. Now, what we did, and we found worked very well, is because containers actually have quite a powerful motor in them, they can actually pull the fruit. We call it to about 15. We call it 15 degrees in our blast chillers or our forced air chillers. We then allow the container. We then load it at that temperature, and we allow then the container to slowly reach that core temperature over a period of about 2 days. It takes about to get those last 3 degrees, 4 degrees out of the fruit. It takes over 2 days to do it in the container. But that is perfect because that basically is conditioning it. And that's slowly taking the temperature down, and you're then reducing the risk of getting any chill damage on